Activate is pleased to present podcast number 1 in our second series. At the recent judging of the Joe Berry Award, 2 finalists, Julia Wood and Ben Jacobs, both presented compellingly on the topic of automation and fulfillment. Both took an omni-channel approach with a specific lean towards fulfillment for online sales. Interestingly, while they came from different viewpoints, neither took fulfillment past the actions of stores when considering the bricks and mortar angle. To expand on the application of AI and automation into and past store level, we've invited CEO of Strikeforce AMC and Activate Director Matt Lloyd and Strikeforce CTO Edwin Hoi to discuss the current industry position and further to raise debate on AI over the need for greater application through service providers. So welcome to Matt and Edwin. To begin with, Edwin, can you give your view of where AI and automation are across the industry and where the most prominent forces are being felt?
Yes, thanks, Keith. Lovely to be with you. So for me, AI has been a groundswell in the last 5 to 10 years with the amount of data that both retailers and suppliers have been capturing. This data is now being turned around into AI applications. So we look at things like customer behavior analysis, sentiment analysis, being able to do long-range sales forecasting, as well as being able to manage logistics from the point of raw material acquisition to meet that demand. We see a lot of that happening in the industry. For us as service providers, our main purpose is to be able to service our clients at the fixture, and we've been seeing a large number of impacts from AI as far as being able to divert our resources to the right place at the right time. So this requires a certain level of sophistication in making sure that our technology can deal with traffic conditions, weather conditions, the availability of our staff, and just to make sure that we can arrive at the time that we expect to arrive and to be able to do our work efficiently. We're also seeing a lot of demand in our last mile functionality. That's to be able to, on demand, direct our service providers to deliver goods from distribution centres down to the actual client, the customer.
Matt, you stated in your briefing that there were threats to the teams, the arms and legs of the industry, as the industry consistently changes and at a rapid pace. What are the key threats that you fear and how should they be treated?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I think you could look at it as a threat, automation and AI, because the natural destination is to assume that automation and AI means less arms and legs going out into store and potentially even less quality or at least less engagement with clients, brands and consumers and so on. But to be honest, that might be a bit of a Luddite's view, if you like. I actually believe that if, as agencies within this space and Activate members, for example, there's a great opportunity for us to pioneer automation and AI such that we can grow third-party outsourcing in this space, because we are perceived as experts in managing field teams in its simplest sense, and therefore if there are manufacturers and retailers out there that don't necessarily have the bandwidth to develop automation and AI in our type of area, then we actually could be pioneers in my view, and as can our competitors and fellow members of Activate. I think the second thing is that whilst it looked like a threat to arms and legs and quality even of execution, there's a great opportunity to redeploy the resource away from just necessarily doing stuff at the fixture. So I think, again, as we continue to pursue automation and AI, there are going to be different jobs in our types of businesses, more planners, more developers, in Edwin's team, for example. And I guess the analogy I would use is that, in the end, you probably end up with a few more air traffic controllers than we have now, and perhaps a few less pilots and crew. I think the third area is we have a great opportunity by having to recruit that type of resource of increasing diversity of talent in this industry, away from just the out and out field management that we do very well as other services that are complementary. But I think the more we get into the tech space through automation and AI development, we're going to attract a different level of talent and diversity of talent, in my view. But I think Edwin picks up on a point which is very valid, which is in the end, I think we've got to see it as an opportunity to enable clients of agencies such as ourselves to spend less actually on feet on the street because of the enabling automation and AI and the insight that comes from that. And therefore we can be far more targeted in the way we go to market, where we go, who we send, what we do in store, what tools do we need, and so on. And therefore increase the return on investment to our clients in field callage. And in the end, ironically for us, I'd rather see clients spend less overall, which is great for them, but probably split their spend between field and analysis. And therefore, the analysis is what drives the field and increases the ROI. And meanwhile, of course, they've spent less in the top line overall anyway. So from a threat perspective, yeah, there are threats. I think the threat is if you don't get on board with it. There's also a threat to see automation and AI as just the next big fad. It's better than that. It's more than that. And as Edwin says, it's been moving ahead for some years now, and we're seeing more and more influence of this area in our industry.
So picking up on that, Edwin, as the technical advisor, how do you bring automation AI data to become part of the insurance for the service providers and their teams?
So for me, and a lot of industries have been going down this digital transformation, and Strikeforce having to start this journey in early 2018. One of the things a lot of organisations need to think about is the recruitment profile of the people in their business. Traditionally, we've hired business resources that have business degrees to be able to manage businesses. But I think what you'll find in the future is there'll be a level of software engineering acumen required by business people. And that's just because the industry is moving towards a higher level of knowledge set required to be able to use data, automation, and AI, and it requires a certain level of thinking and problem solving. So what I've seen in the industry is a convergence between business acumen and engineering acumen coming together to create a perfect storm for resources. So, what that means is you get more value out of the people in your business. They can not only create innovation for you and apply that innovation into your business, but they also have an understanding of how a business operates. And those two things become a perfect storm. And that's really, in the essence, that's what digitization of an organization, in essence, means to me. It's one thing to be able to hire external consultants to come in and help you transform. There's always going to be a need for that. But I think most organizations that are really serious about this need to own some of that destiny as well. And that's what we've done at Strikeforce. We've got our own engineering team, and we're powering ahead, innovating in these new times.
So it's an interesting proposition. Matt, do you find that at the moment we sort of look at these teams as being going into stores, looking after promotional situations and brand positioning, but taking on what Edwin said about the lifting in the intellect or the application of information, how does that relate down to the team level, and what do you see as the immediate or near future actions?
Yeah, I think you can look at it again both ways. You could say that with more automation and AI, you can almost do fly-by-wire, such that you can actually send people in a very prescriptive manner, such that they know exactly what they're doing. They don't really need to think about it, and off they go, and they optimize the ROI of whatever they're doing in store because of the fact that they've gone to the right place at the right time. And then conversely, when in store, you can actually arm people with sufficient insight as a result of AI in order to make some really good entrepreneurial decisions in store where possible, within a multiple environment, less so, but certainly with an independent environment, free to buy, then of course you can be a lot more influential. So I think for me, data as a result of, or insight as a result of the data that comes out of highly automating and digitizing the process, as well as using AI to prescribe what to do, that enables agencies like ourselves and in-house teams to be far more rapid in their response. And therefore, what I mean by that is, fishing where the fish are, where the problems are, rather than the old days of a very prescriptive, you go to this call because it's a voluminous call, you have to go every 4 weeks and blah, 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 blah. It's far more rapid response and driven by the challenges. I think the other thing is, we've got to get used to the blending of resources, because if you've got somebody that's in a store that's mainly focused on sampling and the traditional demo stroke sampling work, often agencies look at it and go, well, I can't use them for building displays, or I can't use them for selling in, or whatever it might be. And again, if we're going to be truly real time, driven by strong automation and insight-led AI, then we've got to have people that can do multiple things in stores, not just, as you say, the sort of brand positioning work and so on. The final thing I would recommend is that we've got to get more on board with, to Edwin's point earlier about how do we integrate with fulfillment and last mile. There is nothing stopping us redeploying our resource that just happens to be in the right area at the right time to supplement a retailer's work in the areas of, say, click and collect, or even last mile fulfillment. And that's across all retail channels, obviously not just grocery and FMCG, because as we've seen in COVID, digital and online has obviously grown significantly. So using the resource in a different way, because they can be in the right place at the right time, driven by the data, means you can actually use them for more things. And I think that's something that we're certainly embracing in Strikeforce, and I suggest probably our partners are doing the same.
Does that mean equally then that the relationship that you have with your clients and perhaps with the retailers is going to change? So instead of just being in communication with marketing or sales directors and so on, are you now having to talk to the technology leaders and the developers or innovators in other parts of those businesses or those clients?
Yeah, completely. I mean, our value proposition for clients, whether they be retailers or manufacturers, if I go back 5 years, with all due respect, we had 3 services. We were selling in independents or free to buy. We were doing merchandising everywhere. And we started to go into space planning, which was a bit more downstream before we've even got to the store, and obviously do store layouts and the bays and so on. What we've developed at Strikeforce is now a value proposition that spans 10 services, which are all complementary, they're all adjacent, and they're all about retail services and cover effectively the gambit of the full shopper and consumer journey. As a result, as you rightly say, we are speaking to a host of different stakeholders in clients, whether it be demand planning, production, even in some cases, because we're dealing with demand and supply chain planning, obviously planning of the stores and the fit out and so on. Then you're into consumer engagement, whether it be through digital, social, and obviously in store and events and what have you. And then the core stuff, which is, as you said, the older stuff, if you like, of this mix, which is the selling and merchandising. So there's no doubt that, with more data, with more insight, with more automation, with more AI, and with the development of the prerequisite services, we're touching clients across a wiring in of many different faculties within their business.
So Edwin, from that point of view, where do you see the responsibility to create and maintain a dialogue on this change in the way that we relate across the industry?
So I think there's always got to be some space for industry bodies to help focus both ends of the whole supply chain. And for us as service providers, I think we need to make sure that when we are talking to our clients, that we're actively talking up the need for database or data-driven applications, how our services augment AI, how we're moving our service towards that goal of being able to be really efficient at the shelf. But industry groups such as Activate play a key role in being able to get the information out there, because it's an independent body, which gives it a little bit more credibility. Vendors tend to have a very biased view of their own technology platform. So I think it's important that industry groups do play a part in being able to promote this move in the industry. And also, I think the technology leaders within these businesses, I think they've got a big part to play in being able to translate that technology into business terms for their business leaders.
Matt, you'll be aware that Activate's about to release the second edition of the industry report. Is this the type of place, the right place to be advertising or promoting that communication on these changes that can be made in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think Activate has a great part to play in driving thought leadership to its members and potential clients of its members and so on. So I think absolutely the industry report, as you mentioned at the top, it's been great to see some of the topics that the Joe Berry award finalists were selected on. We're covering this type of space. It's very much in vogue. And we've got to see it as not just in vogue, in fairness. This is here to stay. That doesn't mean, we have to get too sexed up by it. It's all about what does it deliver for both clients and ourselves. But yeah, we've got to be, as Activate, I think, and members of Activate, pushing the thought leadership in this space, because otherwise, yeah, the chances, if we don't, are that outsource agencies that just stick to simple selling and merchandising as core services, and in a way that's kind of a predictable call file and coverage plan, it's going to be outmoded.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've got to push hard to make sure that the communication does keep going. Interestingly, through this conversation, it raises the point about what the teams will be doing as they increase their abilities in this area. And is it a situation, Edwin, where they can go into a store representing a client and come out as if they've been representing the retailer?
Absolutely. I think, what the data provides us the ability to do is to run algorithms that can make decisions, and those decisions can then be executed by our resources at the shelf. Now, I'll give you an example. We could be placing an order for our client at a store, and on the next visit at the store, our AI systems could remind our brand activators that order has arrived and needs to be placed on shelf. Or another simple example could be that on a subsequent visit that's not related to our client, we realize that their products haven't been ordered in the recent times. And so our system could prompt our brand activators to potentially place more orders in for our clients. So they're the kind of things that humans can do, but require a fair amount of management that AI systems can be used to offload to, if you can put it that way.
And my build on that, Keith, would be, as we all know, with successful businesses in the last 10 years, they've made a fortune, frankly, some have, of digitizing what was previously fairly manual or inefficient or menial. What we're talking about here is not new news in terms of often the tasks that we're doing in store, as Edwin's just said, but because of digitization, it's more efficient, it's more effective, drives an ROI, reduces cost, and effectively, because it's more insight-led, you're going, with something in mind to do that is absolutely required to be done. So we're kind of just, virtualizing and digitizing stuff that we've all been doing for so long, and that's where the holy grail is in terms of reducing efficiency and cost to our clients.
So speaking of that holy grail, is it something that you as Strikeforce would want to hold close to yourselves because it has innovation that will benefit you? Or is it something that should be shared across the service providers, certainly the membership of Activate, to make sure that the whole industry is progressing at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a killer question, because there's no doubt that those that get on board with this play are going to have a competitive advantage because of being a first mover. I like to think that Strikeforce is in that camp. That said, we're very keen, because one of our key values is to increase the industry's professionalism. It's actually one of our strategic drivers as a business. And part of being part of Activate and agreeing to do forums such as this and others, and Joe Berry and what have you, is to further that thought leadership on behalf of the industry. So if we can all get a bit better, then absolutely it's good for talent recruitment. It's good for the ROI of this industry as opposed to arguably in-house resource. And therefore, it's likely to grow the overall cake, frankly. So, yeah, it's a bit of both. There's definitely things we're doing that we'll keep close to our chest. But, in broad terms, very keen to wax lyrical, frankly, about the benefits of automation and AI for our industry.
Picking up on that point, and certainly to close off this particular podcast from both of you, what is the one key point that you see that will take or make AI and this automation process super beneficial for the industry?
I'll go first if you like. I'll be a bit facetious and say people have got to realise that this is not a fad or a trend or a here today, gone tomorrow. So I'm not going to get into technicalities of what we're doing with AI or the enablers or whatever, but I think just that perspective of context that this is here to stay, and we're on a bit of a journey, as the cliche might suggest, and it might be an early part in that journey. But if you don't do it justice and don't see it as a threat, as I said at the start of the podcast, then you're going to miss out. And it isn't going to be something that's just going to be sort of, oh, well, it's just a buzzword, AI, and, all this, that, and the other. It's a bit like augmented reality or photo recognition or whatever. These things are here to stay. And therefore, we've got to welcome them as an industry with open arms, because they are a source of competitive advantage. They can increase outsourcing if we become expert in this area. And in the end, we deliver a better ROI for our clients, which makes them more sticky. So if I would say anything that's going to be the success factor, if you like, it's let's be serious about it.
Yeah, and I sort of echo that from a consumer perspective as well. I think as the pervasiveness of AI becomes more and more accepted in mainstream society, I think what you're going to find is suppliers should be doing that ahead of time. We should be using this technology ahead of time, because it's only a matter of time before the general population just see it as just another part of life. Actually, I think I talk to a lot of people about how data privacy is such a big issue at the moment. I think in the future, people will be happy to give away some of that privacy and let AI control some aspects of their lives for a return benefit. And if I can use maybe, how browsers are used to provide you recommendations of products that you bought through the use of cookies, I can just see that being transferred into the real world in retail outlets, retail settings as well. So the march towards this is happening. It's inevitable, and I think the sooner organisations get a grasp of it and try to and make sure they understand how to apply it, the better off they will be and not be left behind, as you will.
Yeah. Again, my build on that would be that when I say it's here to stay, and as Edwin rightly says, this is becoming pervasive as a consumer, a shopper, a retailer, a manufacturer, whatever. We've got to make sure that it's not perceived through ignorance or understanding as one of those things that, oh yeah, I better talk about AR, I better talk about AI, I better talk about automation and so on. The way we're approaching it is that, automation, digitization, and AI being part of that are the way we'll run the business going forward. It's not just a project that's here today and gone tomorrow. And you do get obviously people that perceive it as something like a trend or a fad that's temporary. And I remember, a few years ago in Australia, everyone was talking about, e-commerce will never work in Australia because of the geography and the supply chain challenges of getting around and so on. Well, two key things. One is, as we know, over 80% of the population live in heavily urbanized areas anyway, so that kind of doesn't hold up. And then secondly, look what COVID has driven. It has driven an explosion in e-commerce because clearly it was the best way of people getting products and services. And that's now here to stay. And I think that's going to help us actually accelerate more automation, more digitization, and obviously AI being part of that. So it's not going anywhere other than forward.
It's pretty clear from the conversation that we've had here today that there's a whole lot going on in the background in this AI and automation area that a lot of people aren't talking about. And I think it's one thing that Activate Group Australia will take up and make sure that the message is kept moving and that more and more people are aware of what can happen or what will happen, as Matt has just said, within this industry. Edwin and Matt, we appreciate very much the time you've taken this morning to come in and record this podcast. And we thank you very much for that. In our future podcasts, we'll be talking to Amy Knight on diet and environment. And again, we'll bring in Laura Moller, who will talk to us about disabilities in the industry. Some very, very good podcasts following up on the Joe Berry Award presentations that these young people have made. Thank you for today. We look forward to seeing you again in podcast number 2.